You're listening to Catholic Family Podcast, Episode 4.
Back with Catholic Family Podcast. I'm Kevin Davis, and I'm very fortunate to be joined by Father Timothy Geckle, who I think I can call him a friend. But I have to say, I have to lead off in saying that really we go way back, but we haven't kept up as much as I would have liked. I think obviously Father having a very busy life as a priest, as all the priests have, and me living in Germany, it's been a little hard to keep up. And so I still kind of remember Father more as this really energetic, funny high school boy than as a priest now in Arkansas. So I'd love to talk with you about that, Father, about your new mission in Arkansas, or I guess not so new, but anyway, your mission in Arkansas, what's going on there with your parishes. And I think we also want to talk about charity and the lack thereof, perhaps, and how we can build charity and proselytizing in this modern age. So, Father Geckle, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's good to talk with you.
And so, Father, I guess, just briefly, what's your story? How did you find your way into a priestly vocation?
Well, as Father Heine would say, it all started out when I was a little boy growing up in Germany. I didn't grow up in Germany, but I was raised with the CMRI. We had a nice parish in Ohio there where I grew up. We lived about 10 minutes away. As I was growing up, we had a small parish school there for about 6 years where the CMRI sisters taught. Really, really great education there. We had a very wonderful priest, Father James McGilloway, who was very, very holy man, and very excellent parish priest. He did a lot. I think by his prayers and sacrifices, he won those graces for a couple people in our parish, in his parishes, I should say, for a vocation. But from there, went to Omaha. As you know, we went to school together with your brothers. Really, I think that kind of cinched it. I mean, growing up as a kid, I kind of thought it would be cool to be a priest, but didn't really understand it at all. Mm-hmm. But in Omaha, going out there, as you've talked about before, just seeing the example of the priests, the bishop, seeing those seminarians and everything, it just made it very real and very approachable, very something that you could do as a human being, not something that's just so far off that you can't ever accomplish. But a high school that really helped a lot. Enter the seminary not knowing if it was a vocation, but went through with it if they definitely need more priests. So if God wants me to be there, I guess I'll find out. And I guess apparently God wanted it that way. So I've been a priest for about 4.5 years now. And until just this past summer was helping out in Omaha with the school there, teaching and then covering different missions on the weekends. As far as Arkansas goes, Father Gregory Draymond, as would drive to the moon and back, it seemed, just covering all these different missions, different places. And there's some groups of people that he had mass for in Arkansas. And then some people eventually got around to getting in touch with me, getting in touch with the bishop about, hey, could we have mass more regularly? And started coming down twice a month on a Saturday. And then after we had some more priests ordained, I started coming down every Sunday. And then a couple more people came, and it just was able to grow slowly but surely. And to the point where I've got 4 missions, or I should say two parishes and 2 missions in Arkansas, and then one other mission up in Missouri that I cover. So been a lot in between there that has happened. But
and I definitely want to talk more about. Sorry to interrupt, Father. I want to talk more about that. That the Arkansas parish, because I think I've heard there's some really good stories about how that all came about. But I have to add in a few things. The one, I know that when I was in Omaha, I don't remember who mentioned it. I think it was Father Gronenthal who said that Father Gregory goes about with this Indiana Jones theme music in the background. Just kind of this hero music, because he was just unbelievable. And I know you experienced that too, especially in the seminary, and the things that he could accomplish as a teacher when he was driving, I don't know, 30 hours a weekend or something like that. I mean, it was truly inhuman. It was inhuman. I don't know how he did it.
Yeah, as Bishop Pivarunas said one time when he was giving a retreat talk, he said Father Gregory would do the impossible for the ungrateful for nothing. And that was kind of what we saw in Father Gregory, just going all over the place. Yeah. And Indiana Jones. Yeah. That was the theme song that right. We would start humming when he walked out of the classroom on Fridays.
Exactly. and you, Father, too. I know Father Borja he kind of bragged a little bit for you in saying that before you moved to Arkansas, you were doing was it 11-hour one way? Is that right?
No, it's
one day. Okay. Okay.
It's a 9-hour drive one way, and then you have the travel in between, and then 9 hours back. So it was about 1,400 miles every weekend. 20 hours of driving, something like that. But it's not anything that Father Gregory or the bishop or other priests haven't done or are doing now. So it's not like the other priests don't do just as much and more. But yeah, it wasn't too fun. Going into the classroom on Monday mornings, as all of my students could vouch for. Mondays were rough, but
that must be hard, right? That, I mean, you have, I think that's a really an amazing thing these days, that back in the heyday of the church, you would have, of course, you wouldn't have these priests doing these incredible missions. I mean, not normally, at least. So you had teachers, and you had, I guess, priests who would travel, and now, of course, with the lack of priests and the lack of religious, you're forced into doing both, especially in Omaha and these other locations that priests were. I mean, Father Gregory was doing these trips and then teaching the high school several classes and then teaching the seminary the rest of the day. I mean, it's really superhuman. I think anyone listening to this show, you cannot appreciate enough what these priests are doing for you. I mean, truly, it's truly inhuman stuff. It's stuff that like truck drivers do, that maybe they're doing these miles, but then they don't have to go teach school on Monday, like you say. I mean, it's amazing, really incredible.
I think there's something to say about how easy we have it comparatively to our forebears. If we look back a couple centuries, especially in the United States, America has always been a mission country. It's not a Catholic country. There were always a huge shortage of priests. I mean, we're driving cars with air conditioning, whereas they were riding horseback. We have, a couple masses spread out, yes, but they were back in a time where they're having to ride their horses all day, and that was before Pope Pius XII. Made it easier on us with regard to the communion fast. So you imagine a pioneer priest doing 3 masses on a Sunday, and from midnight he couldn't have a drop of water. He couldn't have any food. They were I mean, heroes and martyrs to the missions, really. So what the priests are doing now is very sacrificial. By the grace of God, we're able to do it. But it's a lot easier, I think, than it was in the days past, especially the early days of this country.
Right. And something else that you mentioned, Father, I wanted to comment on, that you said when you went to Omaha, so you had been a boy and you had thought about being a priest, and you went to Omaha, and that it kind of cinched it, I think you said. And I think that makes me curious. Why did it cinch it for you? Why was it that when you saw it, it was more realistic rather than more intimidating?
Well, it's kind of funny because Father Borja said the same thing on the first podcast you did with him, that, it's kind of the same with me. But Father James, Father James McGilloway, like I said, very holy priest. But he was older, and because he was so holy, I think it was intimidating. It was like, I could never be like him. I could never be holy like that. I could never be so humble and so patient. I mean, then I went out to Omaha, and as you know, we had Father Gronenthal with us, being our border master and doing things with us. And he was just so approachable, so warm, so fun. The things that we did together. Boarding was he made boarding so fun and something that we'd love to come back to. As seeing that, like, oh, well, that's something that that I'm drawn to now, more so than I was before. I was, of course, drawn to it before, but, seeing that in him, seeing that, you can have a good time and be Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be serious all the time. You don't have to be somber all the time. You can have a wonderful time, and you can do anything but sin, as a Catholic. It's a very joyful thing. It's a very wonderful thing to be Catholic. And I think a lot of times there's a mentality that being a Catholic means you have to be somber, you have to be serious, you can't enjoy anything, that you have to give up everything. And as Catholics, as followers of Christ, we should, have a spirit of sacrifice where we try to die to self and take up our cross and follow after our Lord. But at the same time, there are many good things in this world that God has given us that we can enjoy as long as we don't commit sin. So, that's what really was brought home to me in Omaha, as well as having good Catholic friends. I mean, you remember we used to talk about the church and about souls and about vocations. We used to talk about that all the time. Yourself and, your two brothers, Father Philip and Dominic. I love that. We could talk about the church. We could talk about what the priests are doing and the importance of that. We talked about it. I didn't have that where I was growing up. I didn't have friends that we talked about things, that cared that much about God and cared that much about Catholicism. And I think that's so important thing for Catholics, to have people around them that are going to be good examples and also share that love for Catholicism.
And how do we do that, Father? I mean, that's a good segue into our next topic is how can we as Catholics, and this being, obviously people listening are largely not religious people. These are people with families. These are single people. These are people from all over the world. I think truly, I mean, listeners from all over the world, that it's a hard world to live in, because as we spoke with Father Borja, everything is against us. The world is against us in every possible way it can be. And how can people live that Christ-like charitable life that will help, obviously, first of all, bring us to heaven, but secondly, bring others to the faith?
Right. Well, I think you made a really good point with your dad, or when you were talking on that previous podcast about the simplicity of the faith in the early days. We go back to the early days of the church. We think of Rome and the martyrdoms and all of that stuff. But, truly the blood of the martyr was the seed of the faith, blood of the martyrs. But also what converted people was, see these Christians, how they love one another. That is what attracted, the pagans to Catholicism, was charity. That was something that the pagan world didn't know. And I think in our day, charity has grown cold, truly, especially with the things going on this past year, 2020. Charity has truly grown cold. But I think what especially attracts people to Catholicism is charity, good example. It's such a important thing that as followers of Christ, God, who is love, as the apostle says, God who is love, and we Christians, followers of Christ, are meant to imitate that, especially amongst ourselves. We have to love God, love Christ in our neighbor. And this is what draws people when they see a group of Catholics. They see a group of people that they get along. There's unity, there's charity. You're drawn to that. You see in them that early faith of the early Christians, that simple faith, that simple Christianity, that see these Christians, how they love one another. That draws people. It's not an easy thing to do, obviously, but I think when you have a common purpose, common goal in mind, to help each other get to heaven, to support each other, because like you said, it's a very difficult world we live in. But to be that support for each other is so important. How do we do that? Practically speaking, I think, if it has to start at home. Charity starts at home. If you and I, if we're not living a good, holy life, if we're not seeking to, live a good prayer life, if we're not seeking to know ourselves better, deny ourselves, take up our cross, follow after Christ, if we're not trying to learn more about our faith, do our spiritual reading, if we're not doing those things, then our faith is going to be weak. It's going to be cold. It won't animate us. It won't live in us, and we won't live our faith. And so it is, if you're just worldly minded, if you're not trying to live a holy life yourself and love God above all things, then how in the world are you going to get along with other people? How in the world are you going to have true charity? And so I think it has to start at home. It has to start with your own personal life. Are you putting God first? Are you learning more about your faith? Because, there are very few things that we just, that we have to know, that we have to do just bare minimum with regard to our faith. You go to Mass on Sundays and you follow the commandments, and you keep the commandments of the church. You do on the fast days and don't eat meat on Friday. There are very few practical things that we have to do, really, if you think about it. But there's so much more. There's so much more to Catholicism. There's so much beauty and depth to it. And, unless you're filling yourself with that, you're not going to live it. You can be Catholic and not live a Catholic life, I think is a point to make.
Absolutely.
Unless you're filling your mind with more information, with more of the works, the lives of the saints, how to pray, the virtues, all of these things. It goes into your mind, in your intellect, and then it carries over into your will. Because if your mind is filled with that, your heart is filled with that, then it carries over into your actions, into your life, and other people see that, and it helps them. It's hard for so many people to live a Catholic life because they're alone. They don't have other Catholics around them to be that good example, to be that support. We're surrounded by the world with the internet. It's not just, out in the world when you go outside your home. It's in your home. You pick up your phone, you turn on the TV, whatever it is, everything you see and listen to, it's everywhere. The worldliness, and the complete lack of faith. So how, you have to put more effort into learning your faith, loving it, living it, and surround yourself with people as best you can, I guess. Not everybody can, but be around people that are going to be that good example and that support and foster that spirit of charity amongst each other, because God will bless that. This is the thing. I mean, we want to bring people in. We want to convert people, but God has to do that. If God isn't giving these people the grace to convert, to see the truth, they will not. There's nothing that we can do without God, and especially when it comes to completely changing your mindset on life, on the world, on your entire mindset on everything. That's what Christianity is. It's a complete departure from the world and what is we naturally are inclined to. It's supernatural. It's not natural. It's supernatural. And that's a grace from God. You cannot force somebody to convert. You can't truly. And so if you want God to bless your life, if you want God to bless your parish, if you want God to bring more souls to the church, we have to be living a life that God will be pleased with. And that will.
Yeah, it's exactly right, Father.
Yeah.
And you got so much, everything you're saying, I'm totally over here nodding like, boy, you're so right. And there's two things I really want to comment on, because I think you really nailed it on the head with a couple things that I would like to talk about further. One of them is,
sure,
I guess, and I want to get to this second. So this is the second topic, is how do we try to be productive Catholic wise on the internet, and because some people do need that in terms of, because they don't have parishes, they don't have Catholics. I know a man from Poland who's looking to join a parish and looking to find other Catholics to be with. Sure. That's the second topic. The first topic, you said something that really struck me, and you said true charity. And I think this is one of, in my opinion, one of the most important topics of our time, maybe of any time. Because in our time, the media and the world want everyone to believe that charity or love is letting everyone do whatever they want and not judging anyone about anything, and that everyone is good to do anything they want, and that is being charitable. And if you don't let them do what they want to do, then you are mean and you are not charitable. And I think this is something I'd love to have your comments on, Father. What is the difference between true charity and the worldly, love everyone for who they are?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the first object of charity is God, and secondly, our neighbor. So if you care more about what your neighbor thinks more than what God has commanded, then you're wrong. That's not true charity. It's false. If somebody says, I believe that abortion is okay, and somebody else says, well, yeah, that's wonderful. I have to be kind to them and accept them. No, that's horrible. That's a horrible thing. That's usurping God's right to life and death. That's murder. One of the sins that Christ to heaven for vengeance. So loving God is first, and we love our neighbor in God. So true charity. So I think especially with Vatican II, with the Novus Ordo, and that whole idea of, everybody's right, every religion is good and praiseworthy because, God is active and present in all the different religions. The Holy Ghost is inspiring them, from the so-called Catholic Church, from the false Catholic Church. You have this mindset of you have to accept everyone. You have to accept everything. And that has just gone so hand in hand with the woke culture. So much in hand with the worldly thinking of, I can do whatever I want. Whatever I want is right. And if you tell me otherwise, you're mean. You're a bad person because you won't let me do what I want. Well, you care about somebody if you want what's best for them. Parents, they give their children spankings or they give them, there's consequences of their actions because they want them to grow and become better and develop their character. A doctor, it's kind of like this analogy. Somebody has a serious infection or something that could be life-threatening, and a doctor comes and says, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to hurt you anymore, so I'm just going to let this go. I don't want to cut that out of you because it would hurt you too much. And the person dies from it. Well, that doctor doesn't care about the person. He's just letting him die and suffer because he wouldn't be the doctor that he should be and fix the problem. And that's, if you're looking at people's mindsets or what they want in the light of what God has commanded, you are harming that person by agreeing with their sin, by agreeing with what is evil and what is wrong. You're hurting that person. That's not charity. If you don't, or I should say that if they are doing evil things, that is going to harm them eternally. Who cares about this world if you compare it with eternity? So I'm kind of going around in circles.
No. I think you explained it. You explained it perfectly, Father. And I think it's a really good. Again, it's a segue into the second topic. Again, if I see this all the time on Twitter, and I'm on Twitter more than I should be, admittedly, that's another thing we can talk about. But being on Twitter, I do see these occasions where there are plenty of just bad people on Twitter and people who are posting things, and tweeting things just to get a reaction, and usually these are just people who are up to no good. But I think there are occasionally people who are truly lost and they don't know what is best and they don't understand right from wrong. Really, they weren't told what's right from wrong in our society, and it's a really hard thing for me to know. And say in terms of abortion, I think that's a really good example because you see this really, really prevalent over social media. I think it's really pretty incredible that it's become an open topic, which it of course never was before, which maybe it's a good thing. But anyway, if someone posts something about that, what's a good way to approach it? Because you do want to approach it as a Catholic and in terms of charity, but you can't approach it in terms of it's okay. So what would you say? What would you recommend? Do you leave it alone? I mean, how do you approach that?
Well, it's really hard to give a blanket statement.
Right, of course.
Because every situation is different. But I think the really important principle to remember is, you got to hate the sin, love the sinner. And I don't mean this in the wishy-washy, lovey-dovey, Novus Ordo style and of letting it go and not caring about the evil or caring about the wrong, but to realize that the world we live in and the education system that there is and the propaganda that's put out by the media and just everywhere in entertainment in the media everywhere, so many people are completely ignorant. They just have no clue. They have no clue at all. And somebody puts something on Twitter or Facebook or whatever else that is pro-abortion, whatever, and then you have people jump on there, that basically damn them to hell.
Right. Exactly.
I'm sure well-meaning and thinking that I have to admonish the sinner or whatever else. Well, you have to look at what is that going to do to that person? It's hard to talk about this kind of thing and not sound really soft and not care about
it. It's a very hard thing. Yeah.
But we have to look at, okay, is this going to bring about a good here by, especially you sometimes see, especially on social media, you see somebody just go on a rant or start even cussing somebody out because they're so evil and so horrible. And it's like, well, you're giving a good example there.
Exactly.
Look at what example you are giving, by your words. Are you going to change anybody's mind by getting mad at them, by losing control, whatever else? And I think for so many people, the best thing that you can do is pray for them and sacrifice for them. Is social media the place, in the comment section to start blasting somebody? It's like you said, a lot of people are just there for the reaction or up to no good. But, I think there's very little that can be accomplished in that realm, in that sphere, as far as changing somebody's mind, and especially, sin darkens the intellect, it weakens the will and it darkens the intellect. Now, if somebody is living in a sinful life, it takes grace from God to be able to get out of that. And, usually that grace from God doesn't come from somebody on social media blasting someone else. That's not usually how God works.
That's exactly right. And I think you said it really well too. I think a real key word is control, that if you're going to comment on it, you really definitely better pray about it first and pray to the Holy Ghost for guidance and pray that, hey, I better make sure I don't say the wrong thing, because as I think we mentioned in one of the previous podcasts, anything you say to anyone at any time could matter. And that's how we should think about it. I mean, our parents tell us when we're kids, think before you talk, or don't say anything you might regret, or all these things that, they really do affect us as adults. These are really true statements that if you eat, and this goes for social media as well. I think it's easy to forget that, I'm behind a screen, so who really cares? There's no social interaction. There's no face on the other side. You just think I can say what I want. And it's an extremely dangerous precedent.
Sure, for sure. Especially, I think, traditional Catholics tend to have a reputation for being crazy conspiracy theorists, crazy, extremely mean people and not caring and whatever else. And that's not true as a whole, but, it's just so easy to let fly without any control, without any reasonable, safeguards put on what you're letting out.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, Father, I've got to comment on that, because this is totally a bugaboo for me, that I think one of the biggest problems on Twitter, at least, I don't know about the other medias, but I really think it's become a problem that lay people really become mini theologians, and some have a kind of earned the right to do so. I'm sure some of these people I'm talking about that
Sure.
Okay, they've done a lot of study, they've maybe been through seminary, they're not priests, but they're very well studied. But there are very many too who really start to argue moral and theological issues when they're just lay people. And I think that's a really serious danger, in my opinion, that I think when it starts to get into the serious things, then I think you just strictly should say, hey, friend, whoever you are on Twitter, I'm going to give you the contact of a priest, because this is above my head. This is out of my ballpark. I didn't study this. I don't know. I don't want to mess up, because it's so easy to mess up. I mean, the faith is a very intricate thing, and there are very many issues that are not simple, that are very difficult. They took true theologians years to solve. So I think we got to be really, really careful on social media. And I think there have been, as you know full well, there are certain segments of the Sede Vacantis corner that have gone astray, and that have led many people into the idea that the entire traditional Catholic group, like you say, are kind of a bunch of really, really mean, nasty conspiracy theorists. And that's really something I want to talk to you about too, Father, about how do we grow good Catholic, true Catholic media?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I think, this is a good start. I think podcasts, things online where we try to have keep it Catholic, keep it holy. I really don't know. I'm not much of a problem solver. I like being given tasks and performing them.
Yeah, right.
It's not solving problems, but I think we should try to do what we can. I mean, the fact that you got a YouTube channel and trying to do podcasts, I think that's great. There's, I think, places like Facebook or Twitter. I know your dad has a really good thing going with his Twitter.
Right.
I really don't know.
Yeah. No, it's a tough. I'm putting you on the spot. For sure. It's a tough question.
I think the more we can put out there on the internet to be able to use the internet for the good of souls and for the glory of God is important.
Totally.
I'm hoping to start recording some audiobooks because I know there's a lot of people that don't like to read. And if they can listen, I think they would listen to a book maybe.
Exactly.
I know traditional Catholic sermons.com, incredible amount of sermons on there. But as far as more like a social media thing, you put me on the spot there. I don't know.
Social media. I don't even mean social media, Father. I think social media, I think it's a dangerous medium. I think that, in general, you can do some good from it, truly. I mean, I watched the live streams from the ordinations and from the solemn high masses from YouTube and published on Facebook, and that's a really good use of social media. I think there are very good uses. I think the sharing of the pictures of these ordinations and the stories of these ordinations and things that's beautiful. I think that's the perfect way to use it. Now, I think in general, though, I don't think that it's a platform where we should be out purposely trying to proselytize, because I think it's a dangerous thing. I think, again, as lay people, but I think from what I see, I think there are ways you can find a way to contribute to this proselytizing. I mean, not you, Father. I mean, people listening.
Sure.
That they go and buy an old book, an old Catholic book with an imprimatur. It's good. It's Catholic. You like it. And if you don't want to record it as an audiobook, then copy it and put it online. Many of these don't have copyright. Now, obviously, check the copyright. There are things you need to do. But there are many, many things you can do to contribute to actually helping a Catholic media presence online. Look at, I spend, a few hours a couple times a week to do a podcast, and, it's a couple hours, it's fine, but it's already reached a couple hundred people. And I'm blessed to be able to talk with people like you and like Father Borja and my dad and Rafi, who's going to be on another show, who we can talk about real, solid things. And I'm really fortunate just to have amazing people in my life who can give answers, and that's pretty rare. But I think any little thing helps. I really think that. And I see some of these Facebook groups that do very Catholic things, and I think that's something too. And there's a way. I think there is a way to approach this, over media. But okay, moving on to the next topic. Do you have anything else to say about that, Father? Or
nothing really comes to mind.
Okay, good. Yeah, then we'll move on. I do want to hear your story about Arkansas and a little more of true form of how are you doing really in kind of the I guess the end of the Bible Belt. I mean, Arkansas is in the Bible Belt, right? I would say it is. It's kind of in the heartland Bible Belt of America. How is that going as a priest, as a traditional Catholic priest in the heartland of the Baptists?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, at this point, we haven't really made a huge presence or really gone out and really actively tried to do much, because we're starting a parish from the ground up. It's been rather involved in a lot of things we have yet to do, but our hope is to, get out there and just very quietly help people, do things for whether it's a community or people in need. But as far as what is it like living in the Bible Belt? Well, honestly, I think there's is a very interesting thing that here, I think people in general as a whole tend to be more interested in God and about living as God wants than a lot of other places that used to be really Catholic. I find it, and this is not me trying to say, the Protestants are great and everything. I'm not saying that at all. There's a lot of, obviously, Catholic is not the true faith. But it's very interesting. The harm that the Novus Ordo has done to very Catholic populations is they're not taught anything, from really significantly not taught anything. It doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what religion you belong to. Everybody's going to heaven. Whereas a lot of the Protestant groups are like, no, you got to do this. You got to follow the commandments. You got to live a God-fearing life. And, there's, almost, I'd say about 75% of my parishioners used to be Protestants. The bulk of them, very few of them grew up Catholic. And obviously that's a grace from God, but there was good ground that, maybe they had very, God-fearing parents, at least, that taught them that they should read the Bible every day, or make sure you pray every day. And those were good seeds that were planted and stirred up in them a love for the truth and searching for it. They began to search for it, and if you're searching for the truth, you don't get it until you find Catholicism, true Catholicism, and it's a beautiful thing when you see it. But the people in general, there are churches everywhere. I mean, you go down the road, you're driving down just a small, country highway, and you pass by 5 churches, right, just in 10 minutes. It's incredible. There's Church of Christ, huge, a lot of Church of Christ, a lot of Southern Baptists, Presbyterians, Pentecostals, you name it, they're here. Very few Catholic churches. But it's a really interesting thing, running into people, whether it's at Walmart or local grocery store or the post office. And every once in a while you hear somebody call you father, but for the most part, I first came, I was walking around with one of the families here. They have 11 kids, and, wow, the girls dress very modestly. It's very, very edifying. And so you have this large family, 11 kids, and myself walking around downtown Mountain View, which is, by the way, the folk music capital of the world. And so they always have these people out there playing banjos and it's
wow,
folk
cool.
music.
Okay.
And you have all these people out there, and we're walking around, listening to music. And it was so funny because people would just stare at me like they've never seen a collar before. They've never seen a priest walking around. And you could literally stare back at them for like 20 seconds and they wouldn't look away. They just kept staring because it was so strange. They haven't seen that. But God definitely has made this happen so quickly and in such a way here that I think he has, hopefully, he has many souls that he wants to bring to the true faith here. But there's been a lot of really good experiences with people. You meet them, you talk to them, and once they find out that this person, this Catholic priest or these Catholic people, they're very friendly, they're very down to earth. They're not sticking their nose up at you and telling them, you're going to hell. Just being very down to earth, being very friendly and kind. They're really drawn to that. And if you show some interest in them rather than just in yourself, they're drawn to that. And, like you said before, so many people the world is so focused on me, the ego. And as Catholics, I think we really need to, be caring about other people, not in the way that, what you're doing is good, the wrong things you're doing, that's good. No, we can never condone anything that is evil, but, being like those early Christians that were living in a pagan world, a horrible pagan world, just be kind, care about other people. Don't be afraid to talk to a stranger and just be kind. Even if you can't convert them right there and then, you can at least practice virtue. You can be virtuous, whether it converts that person or not. Don't be afraid to just be kind, show some kindness, show some charity.
Well, and importantly too, I'm sorry to interrupt you again, Father, but the truth is on our side. And I think that's something that we are forced to forget sometimes that we are, again, society pounds it into our heads that we are the weird ones. We are the ones who are on the outside. We are the ones who don't know what we're talking about. We're the conspiracy theorists, et cetera. And I think we have to remember, we have the truth. We are so amazingly blessed and fortunate. You and I are both cradle traditional Catholics, and that's obviously unbelievably fortunate. I mean, it's winning the lottery ticket, honestly. And we both obviously have to appreciate that is also a great, it's a great load on our shoulders too, that because of that, we have a lot of responsibility, that we have had that grace from birth, or from baptism, I should say, and that we have to be able to use that well. But I think that we have to hold our heads high as Catholics. I think we have to, like you say, walk down the street, with well-dressed women, modest women and large families, and you wearing a collar. That is how we have to live. This is who we should be. We need to be the
light of the world.
The light of the world. Thank you. Exactly. Yeah. And that's
there's a point I want to make there that you mentioned, hold our heads high and we have the truth on our side. I think a really interesting point to make on that line is that, yes, we have the truth, and that's an incredible blessing from God. That's a grace that's been given to us. And so many times you have people that, I think especially with traditional Catholics, you've had to study, you've had to learn, you've had to fight against the general trend. But you got to remember to stay humble. And remember that because I'm right, it doesn't mean I have to think myself better than everyone else. Yes, the faith is right, and that's better than anything else. It's only one true church, one true faith from Christ. But it doesn't mean that's you. You didn't, maybe you had to put some effort and some energy and make some sacrifices, to search and find the truth, or, to live the faith and keep it. But you wouldn't be able to do that without God. And so we see so often, and we see it on social media, we see it in parishes, we see it, people we run into, that there is such a spirit of pride and arrogance in, I am right and you are wrong, and you are so far beneath me, and I'm so much better than you. And what must that be like in the eyes of God, that our faith is a gift, the grace of conversion, the grace of faith, especially in the world we live in. It's such a rare thing, and it can be lost, and it can especially be lost by pride. So be very sure that, especially if you get in a conversation with non-Catholics about religion, remember, you don't have to go out of your way to prove anything. The truth stands on its own. You don't have to get angry and get upset to bring a point home. The truth speaks for itself. And that's the beauty of Catholicism and Christianity. The more you look into it, the more you realize how strong and solid it is. And I think we have to be very careful that we don't give in to that spirit of pride, that I'm better than you because I have the true faith. That is such a grace, and it's not anything that anybody can deserve. It's freely given by God. I think that's a really important thing for us to remember in our dealings with non-Catholics. Be humble, be kind, be charitable. Keep that mentality that, it's God that has given me the faith. It's God that can bring the faith to these people. And, yes, I want to be God's instrument and bring that to other people, but I got to make sure I'm not holding myself up as this great, wonderful, perfect person. And because I have the truth, because I have the faith, I'm better. It's right. It's
totally. Yeah, exactly. Really, well, it's really interesting if you look at the recent history since the 1960s and the changes of Vatican II, that the countries that were the leading countries of the Catholic faith, this is Germany, this is Ireland, Spain, Portugal, they have almost completely lost the faith. There is very, very little traditional Catholicism left in Europe. There are some very good spots, but in general, the biggest by far is actually in America. And I think that part of that is because they were not established enough in America to be prideful about it. I think that's a really, really interesting point. And I think that obviously this is not individual. Exactly as you say, you're totally right. I mean, individually, you should never have pride about anything. Yeah. But I think it's really interesting that I really think that's part of the reason why you see the bigger growth in America in the last 60 years than you have in Europe.
Yeah. Well, and it's actually a really fascinating point in America, especially being down here in the South. I was talking to a parishioner about this, looking at the history of it. God can use evil to bring about good, and God can, something that happened 100, 200, 300 years ago that was very bad can actually, in the end, bring about a good thing here. It's like, in America, you have the Puritans and stuff that came into America, and started the colonies and all of that stuff predominantly. Very, very strict. I mean, and that's I think in the South a lot that's carried through. It's very interesting. It's, one thing, I live in a dry county. You can't buy alcohol. You can't sell alcohol here. It's still half of Arkansas. You can't buy alcohol. I'm not saying that's a good thing, a bad thing, whatever. I mean, we know as Catholics that, as long as you don't, drink to excess, it's not sinful. It's not bad in and of itself. But there is this, puritanical mindset in that was instilled in this country at the beginning. I'm not saying it's perfect or holy. I mean, the Masons and all of that stuff. But what I think God has been able to bring out of that is a hanging on to, some of those more strict mindsets. And I know the world we live in, it's kind of hard to say that anything is strict or anything is what it should be, of course. But I think that the transition was slower, especially here, I think in the South, changing to a more modern, more worldly, not worldly, but loose morals and liberalism, all that stuff. I think God used that puritanical, very strict way of life that started this country. I think some of that, there's remnants of that. It's a very, very interesting thing. Whereas like in Europe, I think from what I've learned or heard or seen, it's like, when the Catholic Church went down, Europe went down, as a whole, because the Catholic Church was the moral authority, was the guide. And when the Catholic quote unquote Catholic Church, said everything's fine, then Europe just went, it really went downhill very quickly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you see, I think from that, as you say, I think that's a perfect way to end the show, because I think my point, I want this podcast to be about hope and real hope. Again, hope being in God and in nothing else, and that we should, in these tough times, at least seemingly tough times, when the world is against us and the devil and the flesh and everything is really 100%, in an all-out battle to defeat us and defeat God and to send us to hell, that we shouldn't let that get us down, that we should be optimistic. We should be hopeful in God, and see that God has a plan and that God can take good from anything. As you say, that's a perfect example. The Puritans, who would have thought as a Catholic that something could come from that is good? And we see from anything, God can take good from anything. And I think that would be perfect. That'd be my last thing I'd ask you to comment on, Father. How can people have hope and optimism in these difficult times?
Well, I think looking at the past, we learn from history, like you talked about with your dad on previous podcast, looking at the good that God brings out of evil, the incredible spread of Catholicism and Christianity in the darkest, the worst times. I really like to make the point when people start talking about how bad the world is, and it's probably never been worse. But look at the early days of the church. You look at the early Romans. Look at what the Christians were having to live amongst. The paganism. I mean, absolute paganism. It was, Christianity wasn't there yet. There was no. I just can't imagine living in that pagan world. But the church came out of that. The church came out of that and overcame the world. They overcame Rome. Until Rome became the Holy Roman Empire. I mean, the church is in very, very dark days now. Yes. But the church has always been in dark times. I mean, always. And, there were great saints then. There can be great saints now. God will give us everything we need to get through it.
Perfect.
We always just got to remember that. Whatever comes our way, God's going to give us what we need to get through it.
Perfect. Thank you, Father. I think I'd like to end there. Thanks so much for coming on. I will attach to this podcast, in the comment section, I'll attach my email address. So if anyone wants to contact Father with questions about his parishes in Arkansas, about the faith in general, about the CMRI, you can send that through me. I will send it to Father, and he can answer if it is a fitting email, and if he, of course, has the time and the will to do so. So, Father Geckle, thank you so much for coming on. And I would love to have you on again to talk about any of the many beautiful things of our Catholic faith. And I guess until then, God bless.
All right. God bless you too, Kevin.